Welcome to the Armored Duck Podcast. I'm Lilas, and I am the sponsor of the D&D club at our middle school. And we have a website called the armoredducktavern.com, all one word. And in the creation of that website, there's always an About Us page. And we decided to come up with a story for the Armored Duck Tavern. So I sat down and I wrote a story, handed it to Linkolas and Homlin and a few of my other DMs. And I said, hey, read this, tell me what you think, and we can put it up. We can make changes and we'll put it up. Homlin said it was the best backstory for a tavern that he'd ever read. I don't know how many, backstories there are about taverns out there, but I think it's good. He thinks it's good. The rest of the DMs think it's good. So here we are. And they asked me to record the history of the Armored Duck Tavern for our Armored Duck podcast. So here I am. Grab a snack, grab something to drink, get comfortable, and I'll go ahead and share the story with you. Here we go. The Armored Duck Tavern, a history. The current owner of the Armored Duck Tavern, Devlin Aurelius Cornelius Kevin McDonughna, aka Duck McDonughna, came into possession of said tavern by means of inheritance. The original owner was Devlin's great-great-grandfather, Fstaf McDonughna. Fstaf was a simple man who, in his younger years, enjoyed a good stout pint and indulged in the dangerous business of racing his griffin against other young lads who were stationed at the port of Stormwind. Falstaff was, by all accounts, an adventurous sort, and when he grew bored with racing his griffin on an occasion too many, found himself in the wilds of Stranglethorn Vale. At that time, in the history of the Eastern Kingdoms, young folk stationed at the port of Stormwind were not permitted to venture south of the border of Duskwood unless they were accompanied by a senior staff member. The young lads in possession of a meager military salary were not typically savvy enough to adequately maneuver the delicate negotiations required for business dealings with goblins. Falstaff was just the sort to thumb his nose at authority. He might not have been able to resist the urge to disobey orders, but he was indeed very capable when it came to avoiding being caught out of bounds in his off-duty hours. Some have even said that he possessed a supernatural ability to avoid authorities that were determined to thwart his less than legitimate activities. Falstaff was a young man who pursued bigger dreams of adventure and was in possession of fewer brains than common sense, would race his griffin down to the Stranglethorn Vale capital city of Booty Bay. Falstaff took a shine to Miss Caitlin the Blade Rogeson, who worked in the mid-level of the Salty Sailor as a barkeep and keeper of the peace during games of chance. Miss Caitlin was the only child of Duck Rogeson, who is known throughout the Eastern Kingdoms as the finest bladesmith and rogue master in all the lands. Duck was a wise and cunning man who knew that despite his best efforts, he would not be able to safeguard Caitlin her whole life. And so he made sure that Caitlin could safeguard herself. And safeguard herself she did. It must be said that Falstaff McDonughna had bizarre luck, kind of which folk songs are written. He either won big or lost in a devastating way. There was very little in between for poor old Falstaff. Well, I'm not sure that poor is the right word to describe him. He became financially well off due to his bizarre luck, but the cost of that luck was several fingers, a few toes, a nearly severed foot, and total loss of his left eyebrow. He was also often prone to fits of hiccups, which ended his military career earlier than he would have liked, but he was financially well off enough from his less than legitimate business dealings, smuggling baby murlocs as pets, that he didn't need his Navy pension. Falstaff took a shine to Miss Caitlin, and try as she might, Miss Caitlin just couldn't resist the charming young sailor. Together, the two roamed Azeroth on adventure after adventure. After an unfortunate misunderstanding with the greater goblin community and 3 more missing fingers, Falstaff and Caitlin decided it was time to settle down and live a simple life. They bought a small plot of land in Duskwood to the northwest of the Jorgen farmstead, where they kept a herd of ducks and lived relatively quietly for a short period of time. The disruption of that quiet life came when Falstaff and Caitlin realized that they were nearly smack dab in the middle of a prosperous trade route through some dark and dangerous territory. Merchants and travelers would knock tentatively on their doorstep and beg to stay in the barn for the night rather than try to make it past Volgor Ogre Mound to the west or the Rotting Orchard to the east. The Jorgens lived too far back on their property to be of use to anyone, so Falstaff and Caitlin were their only hope of not being beaten into ogre stew or disappearing mysteriously in the Rotting Orchard. Ever the opportunist, Falstaff asked Caitlin if they might build a small tavern to feed and house the weary travelers. Caitlin, well aware of her husband's luck and keen to have a little adventure in their retirement, wholeheartedly agreed. And with that, Falstaff and Caitlin added a tavern to the front of their duck ranch to house the weary traveler. They put together a small tavern with 4 rooms to let. Caitlin worked the pub area, and Fstaf worked the kitchens with some hired help. The ducks pretty much ranched themselves after being fed, and happy as they were, laid eggs that the McDonoughs used in the tavern for meals. Thus, the Duck Tavern was born. The duck became so popular that the McDonoughs had to hire more help and increase the size of their duck ranch. Like everything else Falstaff touched when his luck was running to the good, the tavern took off and became the place to visit in Duskwood. So much so that the Duck underwent several expansions, and eventually it boasted 20 rooms to let and a fine selection of various ales from all over Azeroth. Over the years, the McDonough family became very wealthy and began to think of themselves rather fancifully. So much so that they began to give their children names that rang of royalty without the titles. To be honest, Falstaff and Caitlin would have hated it. But later generations don't quite appreciate the mental and intestinal fortitude their ancestors had to have to get them to that fancy life. At any rate, that's how Devlin Aurelius Cornelius Kevin McDonough got his name. All the McDonoughs possess a fairly affable personality, if not a bit highfalutin. The tale of Devlin's bizarre luck passed down from Falstaff is how the Armored got to be part of the tavern's name. It's a story that involves, as all good stories do, the love of a kind and lovely young druid, a feud with an ill-tempered gnome who committed arson on the original pub, and a misfired curse from an incapacitated mage. Devlin, a paladin by trade and turned into a man-sized duck, rebuilt the tavern and thought it would be a good idea to capitalize on his misfortune, thus renaming the tavern the Armored Duck Tavern. And that, my friends and weary travelers, is how the Armored Duck Tavern came to be. We sell a variety of t-shirts and plan to add other items in the near future: stickers, water bottles, beanies, etc., to fund the search for a cure for Duck's affliction. And that is the history of the Armored Duck Tavern. I hope that you have enjoyed the story and that you will give us a like and a subscribe. Have a great evening, and we'll catch you next time.